Through fire, movement and time, these Great Rift Valley landscapes were formed millions of years ago. Yet some of the most profound, life-altering changes here have taken place far more recently. Changes not only to the land, but to the very fabric of people's lives. This is not a festival. It is not a traditional ceremony. It is one in a series of workshops convened in Bomet and Baringo counties, seeking answers to a basic yet critical question. What happened to our food? At the center of these gatherings is a research and engagement project titled Histories and Futures of Underutilized Food Crops Reimagined.
This is a research project that is multidisciplinary. It's being undertaken by researchers from several institutions, including University of Lincoln in the UK, University of Nottingham in the UK, Moi University here in Kenya, and the National Museums of Kenya. Together, we are trying to review alongside the communities in two counties, Bomet County and Baringo. We are trying to look back with the communities at the history of these crops, and also trying to reimagine the future with these crops.
How did crops once central to Kenyan diet such as millet, sorghum, and traditional vegetables, crops that are nutritious and well adapted to local environments, fade from everyday plates? How were they replaced by fewer commercial crops? And what was gained or lost in that shift?
There has been a challenge with the maize lethal necrosis disease, which started around 2012. And during that time, a lot of the farmers really were wondering what are some of the possible solutions for the maize lethal necrosis disease. And the challenge was that whilst I was engaging with the farmers, a lot of the times I felt that there is a push towards going for convenient crops rather than thinking about what is really good for our well-being.
Dr. Lillian Korir, raised in Bomet and working across Rift Valley landscapes, saw farmers grappling with crop disease, declining soil health, and narrowing food choices. Her interactions with neighboring farmers, coupled with her field of professional expertise, would then lead her to the questions that ultimately birthed this research project.
What foods are more nutritious? What foods work well for the environment? That means which foods can grow well in Bomet, what comparative advantage do we have as Bometians? And the same thing applies to Baringo.
To understand why these crops declined, the project turned to history, both written archives and oral testimony from elders.
The historical research in its totality has drawn out a number of key themes that really answer that central question of why these underutilized indigenous crops became underutilized in the first place. So one of the most common themes widely known in the literature is the changes that were enforced and brought about by colonial rule in the late 19th and early 20th century relating to land, markets, labor and commercialization.
Professor Matthew Hammerfoot is leading the historical component of the research. He is also Dr. Korir's core principal investigator. He observes that over time, taste preferences, labor demands, environmental pressures, drought cycles, pest exposure, and generational change reinforce the shift away from indigenous crops, with maize becoming the dominant food crop in the land. As indigenous foods slipped to the margins, a quiet pillar fell. The impact was only really felt decades later.
Zamani watu walikuwa wanaenda mpaka wanaseheka. Wanaenda mpaka mtu unapepwa chini kama ameseheka sana. Lakini tulipowacha hiyo chakula yetu ya zamani, mwili inaenda kuanguka haraka. Unapata mtu unakufa kabla hajafika hiyo age.
Nyakati hizo, wakati hospitali hazikuweko, watu waliweza kupata madawa kutokana na miti ya asili ambayo Mungu ametupatia. Na tulipoendelea basi na masomo ikaingia na watawala weupe wakaja, ni kama tulisahau vile tulikuwa tunaishi.
So this project mainly focuses on these underutilized food crops, their histories, the way they've been utilized over time and the way their use has gone down over time. So we want to also see their futures. How is their futures? Can we bring them back to the table?
At the workshops, farmers were guided through 4 thematic stations. At the Shamba station, farmers imagined future farms that were diversified, drought-resilient, and rooted in indigenous crops.
What varieties of crops they would like to have in their kitchen gardens, bearing in mind the health benefits that are associated with consuming the indigenous crops.
In the kitchen, attention shifted to diets, how traditional foods could be prepared in modern, familiar ways. This was where perception began to change.
Na tumeona chakula ambayo natoka kwa ngasapa na tukaonja na tumeona kama ni chakula smart, na tukapata chakula ingine kama ngasapa rupwani, na hiyo rupwani imetengenezwa kwa kidogo dogo na tumekula na iko na ladha mzuri.
Tena ninashukuru kwa sababu tumeelimika tukachua maana ya wimbi. Tumeona hata watoto wetu wanapopanga hata engagement, hiyo masherehe ndogo ndogo, inafaa tutumie hata wimbi yetu kutengeneza hata keki.
Tulipata chapati ya sokam ya mtama yenye haijawekwa kitu yeyote ya mtu. Tukapata keki ya sokam, tukapata kitu kama kasafa yenye imetengenezwa, tukapata kitu kama viazi yenye imeongezwa value, wameongeza na mboga na imetengenezwa vizuri. Tukapata hata vinywaji kama ile tu naweza kupata kwa market, lakini imetokana na vyakula vyetu.
At the commercial farming station, a harder question is asked. Beyond subsistence, how can indigenous crops generate income?
They've also witnessed how other groups have added value. Some of these crops, yes, and also the vegetables. And I think there is some excitement that it can bring income to these farmers. And I hope in future they'll produce these crops not only for their food, because it adds value to their health, but also for income.
In our hospitality industry also, we are going to encourage most of the hotels to be in a position to produce this kind of indigenous foods, so that any customer or client who comes to the establishments can access these foods. That is the isaga, the millet, the managu.
The final station moved beyond words. Music became archive, classroom and bridge. Songs carried farming knowledge, nutrition lessons and cultural memory, especially where written records fell silent.
Get people singing and sharing songs about indigenous crops and plants, because I've noticed that as soon as you ask people what role might song, what role might cultural heritage play in shaping the future of food, they immediately have something to say and quite often something to sing. So I found that although we've been working with professional musicians in both Bomet and Baringo, in a way the job of those musicians has been to draw out the knowledge that people already have.
Across both counties, a pattern is emerging, a deep sense of regret at what was lost, but an even bolder resolve to act and reclaim pride in indigenous food.
I think what struck me about these workshops is that, perhaps unsurprisingly, people are very passionate about their food cultures and food heritage, not just because of the widely known nutritional and health benefits, but also because it is part of people's heritage.
Mama ndio mwanzo ya kusaidia watoto wachue maneno ya chakula ya zamani, kwa sababu mama ndio tegemeo kwa nyumba, mama ndio anapika kwa nyumba. Ndio tunatangaza ya kwamba kila mama ushike hiyo bahati yako na usaidie watoto yako nyumbani.
Most importantly, there is this new curriculum known as competence-based education, the CBC, currently the CBE. There is need to incorporate the aspect of indigenous groups so that our children will learn from their age when they are growing. They will learn about these crops. That is the best way to inculcate this kind of crops into our food systems.
Tusiongoje mpaka mtu mwingine alete kwa kijiji changu. Tunaenda kupeana, alafu sisi wenyewe tunarudia hii chakula ya kienyeji tukikula. Market ni sisi kwanza. Tukisha kula, hiyo ni njia moja ya kufundisha watoto wetu na wachukuu. Tukiambia hii chakula ni kizuri, watajua ni kizuri sababu sisi wenyewe tunakula.
Its next chapter moves into public exhibitions, policy conversations, and national awareness, beginning with the Science Expo at the National Museums of Kenya.
One main dissemination event will be to interact with people in a public imagination kind of exhibition where we are going to work with local students at TVETs, and these students are coming up with amazing designs, food items, creative ideas that they are going to showcase at the National Museum of Kenya. And I would really want to welcome everybody to come and experience this, because this is not just a story for Baringo and Bomet, but it is everyone's story.
From Bomet and Baringo comes a renewed sense of possibility. Food security here is cultural, environmental, and economic. And indigenous crops sit firmly at the center of that future, not as symbols of the past, but as viable, valued choices for tomorrow. The message is one of hope. The future of indigenous foods is bright, and the journey towards it has clearly begun.
Great experience, a great learning opportunity about the benefits of these indigenous crops, not only to our health, also based on the economic value.
People are enthusiastic about the food, about all the different possibilities of using these crops in our diets in the future.
It's been a great pleasure looking at the indigenous foods, the preparation models in terms of the future and the opportunities that can present themselves.
Ile elimu ambayo tumebunzana siku ya leo, tukishika na kutimiza yote ambaye tumepanga, mwaka 5 ama 10 zijazo tutaona watu ambaye wako na afya na wanakaa mzuri.
There's a lot of hope, a lot of opportunities have been presented for these crops.
michi bogen kendo ozi che ateni alegi ke michi bogen kendo ozi che ateni alegi che ateni noe atene gatarweni alegi che ateni no atene gatarweni ulele nuro che telelo uro che tingende geime ulele nuro gendo gochi uro che tingende geime ulele geime koguina oye tingene rengu alle rengu con eliangu oye uro